Some footballers become legends through longevity. Others become immortal because football never stopped imagining what they could have been. Marco van Basten belongs to the second group. To many supporters, Van Basten was not simply a striker. He was elegance. Movement without effort. Finishing without panic. Watching Marco van Basten often felt less like sport, and more like art. Born in Utrecht, Netherlands, on October 31st, 1964, Van Basten looked destined for football greatness from the very beginning. Tall. Graceful. Technically flawless. Even as a young player, he moved differently. Calmer than everyone around him. As though football slowed down when the ball reached his feet. At Ajax, Van Basten quickly became the next great Dutch football talent. And replacing the legacy of Johan Cruyff at Ajax was never supposed to be easy. But Van Basten never tried to imitate Cruyff. He created his own identity. A striker capable of impossible volleys, delicate finishes, acrobatic goals. He could do everything. And somehow, all of it looked effortless. Former teammate Ruud Gullit once called him the perfect striker. And for many football fans, that description still feels accurate. At Ajax, Van Basten scored goals at a frightening rate. Season after season, defenders struggled to understand him. Because he could destroy teams beautifully. He did not overpower football. He mastered it. Then came Italy. In 1987, Van Basten joined AC Milan alongside fellow Dutch stars Ruud Gullit and later Frank Rijkaard. Together, they helped create one of the greatest club sides football has ever seen. Under legendary manager Arrigo Sacchi, Milan became relentless. And Van Basten stood at the center of it all. Football in Italy during that era was brutal. Defenders kicked relentlessly. Space barely existed. Every touch came under pressure. Yet Van Basten still made the game feel graceful. He won 3 Ballon d'Or awards, 2 European Cups, 3 Serie A titles. But statistics still fail to do him justice or explain what made him special. Because Marco van Basten made difficult football look natural. His brilliance was not built on power alone. It was intelligence. A movement half a second earlier than the defender expected. A finish placed before the goalkeeper had even reacted. Football seemed slower around him. That was the difference. Paolo Maldini once said that training against Van Basten felt almost impossible. Because he could beat defenders without even touching the ball. He understood space in ways most players never could. And yet, despite the elegance, there was always something ruthless about him. Van Basten rarely celebrated wildly. He usually looked calm. Cold almost. Like scoring impossible goals was simply expected of him. That quiet confidence became part of his aura. Then came the moment that defined him forever. Euro 1988. The Netherlands against the Soviet Union in the final. As the ball dropped from the sky, Van Basten struck a volley from an angle so impossible that most players would not even attempt it. The ball flew across goal and into the net. Silence for a split second. Then disbelief. For many supporters, it remains the greatest goal in European Championship history. Even now, decades later, the goal still feels unreal. Almost impossible. And perhaps no single moment captures Van Basten better. Beauty mixed with perfection. The Netherlands became European champions. And Marco van Basten became football royalty. But while the world admired the elegance, his body was already beginning to break. The tackles, the pressure, the violence of defending in that era. Slowly, football was taking pieces away from him. By the early 1990s, the pain in his ankles had become constant. Training sessions became difficult. Matches became recovery battles. Still, Van Basten kept trying to return. Because greatness rarely lets go quietly. There is something uniquely sad about footballers whose bodies betray them before their talent fades. Because the genius remains. But the body no longer allows it to exist. At just 28 years old, Marco van Basten effectively played his final match. A football career that should have dominated an entire generation ended almost before it truly finished. Many supporters still believe football lost something special that day. Because Van Basten never looked replaceable. He looked unique. Former manager Arrigo Sacchi once said, "Marco was elegance and intelligence combined." And perhaps that is why his story still feels emotional decades later. Not because he failed, but because football never got to see the full story. Across his career, Van Basten scored more than 300 goals for club and country and became one of the most naturally gifted forwards the game has ever produced. Yet many fans remember him with sadness as much as admiration. Because his story became football's greatest what if. What if the injuries never came? What if his prime lasted another 7 or 8 years? How much greater could Marco van Basten have become? Perhaps nobody will ever know. But maybe that mystery became part of his legend. Because some footballers leave behind records. He left behind imagination. That is why Marco van Basten will always be remembered as a true footballing icon. Not simply because he scored amazing goals, but because he made football feel elegant, effortless, and unforgettable. What is your favorite memory of Marco van Basten? Let us know in the comments below.